Greetings, everybody. I'm Michael Hall, and this is my story. While I ponder on where to even begin, the way my brain works, sometimes things that come to me sometime out of order, while at the same time I'll be sticking to the subject or the point of whatever I'm talking about. But I'm original and native from Baltimore, Maryland, born and raised. That's why I got this hat. It's not just about my team. I like to represent where I was raised at. Currently a resident rather, of Asheville, North Carolina. Been here, March next year will be 7 years. Wow, so much to tell. I'm a husband and a father in that order. Have 4 daughters, 2 of them who I'm currently working to restore a relationship with, and then my current wife, my only wife actually, I've only been married once. We have 2 younger daughters. Let me see. Whew. My life didn't start off how a lot of people's lives start off, considering which journey I chose to partake in as I began to be a young man and then a grown adult. Grew up in a household, mother and a grandmother. My dad wasn't really involved in my life. I knew who he was. I could even go to his house sometime and see him, but he wasn't really an intricate part of my life. So my mother and my grandmother raised me the best they could. The day I was born, I remember like yesterday, my grandmother telling me when I came home from the hospital, they didn't have a stuffed animal for me or whatever. They had a dog. That dog's name was Beaver. A straight mutt, but Beaver was my best friend. We played with him all the time, so forth and so on. And things seemed to be going fine as a young, I was my grandmother's first grandchild, and I was my mother's first and only child. So there was a lot of love from a parental perspective for a mother and a grandmother. I had an aunt who lived with us for a little while. A lot of love, But unbeknownst to me at the time, and I had my uncle, who unfortunately went to federal penitentiary when I was 8 or 9 years old. Unbeknownst to me though, there was something missing, and I didn't realize until I got older, in my 40s, what intricate part for my life was missing that actually nobody really ever told me about. It's ironic, and as I get further into this documentary, you'll begin to understand what subject or what missing piece I'm talking about. But again, grew up in West Baltimore, a place called Edmondson Village to be specific. The neighborhood wasn't really ghetto-ish in regards to landscape, as some people like the title, especially now in 2024 when you hear the reports of Baltimore. It has always had this element of being dangerous. It got worse as I began to get older. But growing up, it was fine. I played outside a lot. I remember I was 8 or 9 years old, and my grandmother and mother took me to the doctor. I was hyper, so forth and so on. The Caucasian doctor told my mother and wanted to diagnose me as hyperactive. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, that's when Ritalin was running high. However, my mother wanted to get a second opinion. So she took me to a black doctor, the black doctor said, ain't nothing wrong with him, he's just a healthy nigga. Let him go outside and play. Which today, at 51 years old, I'm grateful for, having done some research and so forth and so on. I'm grateful that black doctor said, let him go play. Yeah, I was full of energy, but at that time in the 70s, all we did was go outside and play. So I'm a male, so I released a lot of testosterone. We out playing rough, playing football, climbing, jumping. So I was able to release a lot of that tea, come in the house, eat that dinner that my grandmother and mother made, and go to bed, get up and go to school. I remember my grandmother telling me that I was going to like a Head Start, so to speak. There was a part of the church I went to. Teachers who my grandmother was friends with, Sunday school friends and so forth and so on, said, Michael, they're so smart. Excuse me. Summer came back home. When the program started back up, I remember my grandmother telling me, said the lady who was my Head Start teacher told me, said it seemed like something has happened to Michael. So my grandmother, she said, my grandmother said to her, my mother asked the teacher, what do you mean? It seems like Michael had just become dumb. And I'll get to what I believe happened that may have produced that or caused that. But again, started out, man, up until I was around 12 years old, everything was great. You know what I mean? I didn't realize what was the dynamics of what was happening in my life when my uncle went to federal penitentiary when I was 8 or 9 years old. And it wasn't until I was a later adult that I really found out what he went to prison for. I kind of had an idea, but I didn't know the details of it until I was in my 40s, actually. But he was into a lot of esoteric stuff, what a lot will call witchcraft, so much so that when I was a mid-teen, after my mother passed when I was 14 in 1988, I remember my grandmother telling me, said she went to the kitchen to talk to my uncle, her only son, and was calling him, and he didn't answer, so she walked away. And she said later on that day, she asked him, why didn't you respond to me when I called you earlier? And from her testimony, she says, my uncle told her because the devil came up to the window and said, if Brayboy, that's my grandmother's last name, Brayboy comes over there, throw that hot pan of grease on her. So he didn't answer. My grandmother walked away. Thankfully, she didn't get hit with a hot pan of grease and end up with third-degree burns. But Uncle Kenny was into a lot of stuff. And as I began to get older and begin to venture into different ideologies, I came to understand some of the things that he was involved with that were high level. And if you understand the role that men play in families, my uncle was the oldest male in my household, which has great significance, but also great reward or great destruction, if that's the right word to use. So what he was attached to, when he went to the federal penitentiary, I became the oldest male. Despite I was a youngster, I was still the oldest male. So what he was involved in, some of it began to attach itself to me to the extent that after my mother died when I was 14, I used to see images. Doctors would say I was hallucinating, so forth and so on. No, I wasn't hallucinating. Sometimes I'll be sitting watching a movie and turn around and look and could see something go by. I could see stuff in people, so forth and so on. Again, the oldest male in my household, what he was attached to, when he went away, it transferred itself to me. And nobody really realized that. I grew up in church. My grandmother was a devout Christian. My mother was just morally upright at the time. My aunt was in the Black Power, NOI, Morristown Temple, so forth and so on. The Gods of the Earth was in my neighborhood in the city of Baltimore. So I'm venturing in a whole lot of things. But ironically, there was no real male role model, positive, influential. Well, there were some influential, but there wasn't a real positive, real role model to shift me and say, hey, go this direction, go this direction. Because I don't care how much knowledge I had at 8 to 14 years old, I wasn't mature enough to really begin to navigate my life. So with that, without some proper instruction from a male authority, all of the knowledge was intriguing to me. So let me go back some to, let's see, around, I guess I was 8 or 9 years old. Wasn't real aggressive at the time. You would get chased home from school, so forth and so on. I remember I got chased home from school by somebody, and I came to the house and my aunt came out. And she was in the streets at the time. She said, no, she brought me back out in the middle of the street and said, no, you're going to fight. I didn't really want to, but the guy that was chasing me came down. My aunt was known and her boyfriend at the time. So both of us just stood there. I get it. I know the scripture. I'm a minister now. Turn the other cheek, so forth and so on. I think there's a balance in that, because if it's not taught properly, that either you become a doormat or you learn how to properly apply that in situations in your life. I don't believe that the scripture teaches us to just allow somebody to kick us in the face, so forth and so on. So what happened is, because that verse portion of scripture in the Bible wasn't really explain to me correctly. After that time in the middle of the street, my aunt and the guy that was chasing me, I remember at 12 years old, something had switched in me. I started hearing people talk about how big I was, da 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 da. And I remember going downstairs to the locker room at the gym, and when the school tough guys, I just went and challenged him. He whooped me, but every time I would hit the ground, I'd get up and fight him again. And nobody understood why, but something had switched. And again, there was no positive real role model in my life to say, hold on, let me show you how to regulate your strength, your mass, so forth and so on. So I was dealing with trauma from being bullied. So once I realized, hey, I'm bigger than most people, I started operating from that trauma. Oh boy, this is tough. At 13, my mother and I were at the hospital. I didn't really understand why we were there at the time. I just knew something serious was going on because I could tell by her body language. I could look back today and actually see her, the nervousness in her. So we sitting in the doctor's office. The doctor leaves out. He closes his door some. While I'm sitting there, I hear the doctor in the hallway talking. So I kind of direct my ear attention to what he was saying, and he's telling another doctor in the hallway that my mother wasn't going to make it. Another trigger was tripped. My mother looked at me and said, "What's wrong?" I said, this is just what I started coming into. I said, I'm gonna hurt that doctor. She said, "Why?" I said, "He just told another doctor that you weren't going to make it." I said, "How he going to tell him before he come tell us?" Of course, I didn't know how the medical field works, so I felt like he's being disrespectful. He's going to come tell us first, da 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 da. Ironically, to strengthen my mother, she said, "Baby, it's going to be okay." She wasn't crying, so forth and so on. She probably already had an idea. But when I heard that my mother wasn't going to make it, all the gloves were off. To the extent that I remember when my mother passed June 14th, 1988, we went to the hospital. It was about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. My grandmother woke me up. Understand, so much wicked stuff started going on in my life. When my grandmother first woke me up and told me mommy had passed away, I heard her, but I laid back down. And then she shook me again, and I got up. We went to the hospital. And I remember my grandmother telling me, she said, "Pumpkin," she called me Pumpkin, until the day she passed away in 2008. She said, "Pumpkin, before mommy passed, she was going to have you arrested because she felt like it would be safer for you in prison than it would be in the street." See, let me say something to you. I went from this timid, nice little boy, everybody liked, playful, so forth and so on, to this borderline maniac of a guy that my mother felt like it would have been safer for me to be incarcerated than in the streets. To all of us listening to this, I'm going to ask you something. With all of the issues that we have going on in our community, I wonder if anybody ever notices what I noticed at this point in my life, what I noticed wasn't happening in my life when I was younger. And all of the violence and the running the streets and so forth and so on, no men ever tried to come talk to me. There was one guy, but he was, later I found out he was attracted to men. So he wasn't really trying to help me. Thankfully, nothing happened because I probably would have murdered him at that point in my life. I would have, and been in prison for the rest of my life. But no men came along. I don't know if they were scared, didn't care, and for them I became invisible. But no men ever came and tried to mentor or coach me. None whatsoever. None. There were women, older women in church that would stop. I remember we had a spot where we were selling cocaine, and it was like the OK Corral down there. We had all kinds of weapons. Older women from the church would stop and come talk, but no men would. No men would come and talk to me. They would criticize, "Don't hang out with my son, da 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 da. I don't want you talking to my daughter," but none of them would take the time to say, "Hey, what's going on?" See, you can't tell somebody that's dealing with something traumatic and just give them and become a dictator to them without addressing the real issue that's going on in their life. None of the men came and talked. None of them. So what happened? I began to get worse, to the point that I remember when my first two daughters were born, I was standing on the corner of my street waiting on the bus, and police showed up. 4 police cars showed up and told me to leave the neighborhood. I had gotten so bad in my neighborhood in West Baltimore, which was called Evanston Village, that I was with my daughters in their double stroller, and the police told me, said, you need to leave this neighborhood. But nobody tried to talk. It was, and I look back today like, so with all the criticizing that went on when I was young, and it's still today, like, I see this epidemic going on in society now, and I've lived in 5 different states, I've been a gang member, so forth and so on, and I watch people point fingers at the youth and people and us as men who are supposed to be the leaders in our communities and our homes, from the time I was young, even up to now, I rarely see men taking the responsibility of saying, hey, wait a minute. Hey, wait a minute, we'll take the lead. Listen, we will take the lead on teaching people how to be destructive and how to kill themselves and how to destroy their communities and how to prostitute women and how to rob people of their identity. But we will not take the lead. I'm talking about across the board. There are organizations, I work for an organization, and I'm friends with others who have organizations, but I'm talking about at large that will say, hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute. How you take the lead in helping somebody to be dangerous won't take the lead in helping somebody restructure their life. And that's part of the thing that happened with me. And so I remember my dad only came around, as I got older, I realized my dad only came around to bounce up and down on my mama. And you know why? Because my grandfather, my mother's father, wasn't a good image for her. So what she looked for in a man was what was missing from her relationship with her dad. So when I had my 2 oldest daughters, who are 33 and 32 years old, I wasn't ready to be no dad. That doesn't, and yeah, I became what they call a deadbeat dad. This is one of my narratives. It's funny that everything has a mental health diagnosis in society today, except for what they call a deadbeat dad. Where does a deadbeat dad to get help? You just leave him to be? Something is going on that causes him to think that when you continuously call him a deadbeat dad, there's nowhere for him to go to get treatment. If a mama dropped the ball as being a mother, there are numerous places for her to go and get help. If a kid is dealing with this, that, and the third, there are numerous places for that child to go get help. But if the father drops the ball, there's nowhere for him to go. He's just a sorry nigga. Who would lead a child? A person in their right frame of mind wouldn't. But for a man to turn around and just leave his children and not care, something is going on. But it doesn't get addressed. So my 2 oldest daughters were born May 26, 1990, my oldest daughter was born. I was in Job Corps at the time. Called home, talked to the mother, my oldest daughter, and she told me, said, the doctor said I'll see you same time next year. May 26, 1991, back in the hospital with my second daughter. First daughter's name is Jessica, second daughter's name is Adrian. For some time I was there, so to speak. I mean, we lived in the same house. We lived with my grandmother because the mother of my oldest 2 daughters, her name is Veranda McDowell. She moved in with my grandmother while I was still staying there because her mother had died. So my grandmother, who was Native American, Seminole Indian, and she was a believer, she took her in because she knew if she didn't, her grandchildren, her first great-grandchildren rather, would get funneled into the system, and that was it. I didn't understand that. I didn't even know until I came home from prison. So I was there, kind of, but at the core I realized I was there because we lived in the same house for a little while. So I was, what they call trapping today, or selling drugs, getting the money, so forth and so on. So, I remember humorously, I sort of been going to this kid store to buy a bunch of clothes. Buy a double stroller. Well, I went in and spent $100 on Minnie Mouse. My mindset is I want my kids to be fly. forget that we got to get them around town. I didn't have a car. We got to get on a bus or the subway back in the 90s. But I want my kids to be fly. So anyway, as the years started going by, Veronda and I got grown. So we told my grandmother we were moving out of her house. We don't need to be here no more. Didn't realize that my grandmother was saving money for us. My mother worked for the federal government, so as long as I was in school, there was a check coming in. My grandmother would take that money, put some of it away. My grandmother, Veronda was getting public assistance, so my grandmother was helping put money away, so forth, so on. So my grandmother came home one day. She had stopped by the bank, but she came home. She said, "Here's your money, Michael. Here's your money, Veronda. Y'all can leave." So we go and move in with her drug addicted sister and her boyfriend and all her children. I start sniffing heroin. No, I'm sorry. I started sniffing heroin before that. Actually, when Veronda and I met, I was 17. 18 years old, I started sniffing heroin. This was a direct setup based on what I believe the enemy, the devil. Because I come up to the steps to my children's mother's apartment where she was living with her mother, and there were two little capsules sitting on the top of the steps. I picked them up, went inside, sniffed, high, then we had sex. And let me add something to it, okay? No dad really in my life. No men, no positive role models that come alongside me and try to mentor me or walk with me. Let me tell you one of the ramifications of that. So when I came in and had sexual relations with a woman, nobody had told me about the seal that was going to be broken on me and on her, and that neither one of us were mature enough to be able to handle that. So when I sniffed the heroin, if any of y'all have a history of substance abuse, you know what that did. Went from 15-minute man to 60, 90-minute man. So I keep using. Already, I'm hyper, so heroin slowed me down. Along with the culture of Baltimore, which was known as heroin capital in the 90s. Everywhere you went, there was heroin being sold. So we moved in with her sister, and her sister sniffing heroin, so that, hey. One day, the relationship starts going bad. First, I'm already ratchet, you know what I mean? Now I'm not selling drugs anymore, so forth and so on, not really working, so there's a financial strain. So now we both become unattractive to one another. There's a contention between us. We're arguing, living in her sister's house, who has a dysfunctional man in her house, who is not really taking care of his children, to the point I went up the street to use the payphone, called my grandmother. I said, "I'm coming home." She said, She said, "You'll learn now." And all hell broke loose. We moved out of her sister's house because her sister lost her place, her home. We ended up in a shelter where that was part of this church. Let me say something. I didn't really understand, I didn't, in no way possible could I comprehend or did I even realize what was going on in my life at the time. So, I'm staying in this shelter. Keep in mind, I've never been educated about sex and so forth and so on. So my comfort is, this girl that's in the shelter, she likes me. See, the mother of my children was staying with one, so it was a church shelter. She was staying with one of the friends of the pastor, a woman who had a husband staying with her. I'm staying at the shelter, which was a co-ed shelter. The men slept on top floor, women second. The kitchen and stuff was on the first. So this chick liked me, so I go to have physical relations with her, and it got out, and they put me out. No therapy, none of that. Come on, listen. Well, you should have known you were wrong. Oh yeah, I knew I was wrong, but what do I do? Just knowing you're wrong don't mean nothing. No one offered any strategy about how to change my life. I'd heard the gospel, but I always heard it legalistically. You need or you're going to hell. I get that. I even believe it. But how am I change? Because that's all people were doing. You need to, instead of somebody sitting down and explaining and then begin to walk. So when they put me out of the shelter, I went back to the streets and was turned up, like angry, enraged, literally enraged, hated everybody. I'm talking about, listen, it was violence towards my family. Anybody that I came in contact with, they were not safe. Anybody. And I mean, if some of my family members were here, they would attest to it, like nobody was safe around you. It didn't matter. Woman, child, man, it didn't matter. People say, oh, you beat up a woman, you a chump. Anybody. Beat you up, stab you, shoot at you, rob your house. I robbed and broke in my next door neighbor's house. She had a brother who was ratchet. I didn't care. I sat right on the steps in front of him and let him know and he knew, not I let him know, but he knew I broke in his sister's house. I didn't care what you gonna do. I was ratchet. That's the lifestyle that was attractive to me, but that's all I saw and nobody offered me seeing anything else. So, end up homeless from about 93 in Baltimore. Yep. Was it tough? Yeah, but I didn't realize that my life was already all over the place. So the real magnitude of what was happening never occurred. So at this time, I'm 19 to 20. Guess what? No men still came around. Oh yeah, you come work for me. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna get some money. I'm strong, big, you know what I mean, at the time, 195 pounds, cock strong. I didn't need a job. But considering where I was at the time, in my life, yeah, I'll take this money. And I can get high some more, go buy another pistol, da 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 da. But what about my identity? Nobody. See, let me pause for parentheses for a second. Born in 1972, so the generation that gave birth to my generation, let me do it this way. My generation created NWA. New Jack City, Menace to Society, Boys in the Hood, la 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 la. We know today through whistleblowers and so forth and so on that stuff was strategic to bring destruction, continued destruction to black families period, but they specifically targeted black families. Because let me say something to you, the strongest unit team structure in society is the family unit. If you break that down, society, cities, counties, the world, it's a domino effect. It's the domino effect. If the family unit is destroyed, then the powers that be can sit back and put their feet up. So I come out of a generation, I was born into a generation where we created NWA, Menace Society, Boys in the Hood, so forth, so on, Colors, all that, Clockers, all that. The generation before me created Iceberg Slim. We had R. Kelly. They had the Temptations, who their report said the Temptations did stuff to women that R. Kelly and Aaron Hall supposedly has done. So there was a seed planted. But then even before that, let's go all the way back to slavery and how the identity of a man in regards to his family had begun to be stripped. Stripped. Look, I'm 270 pounds now. I got a deep voice, and I could take y'all down to how they are really restructuring society to make what they call toxic masculinity. So I got a deep voice. That means I produce a lot of tea. I got a lot of mass. That means I produce a lot of tea. They don't want that. When the last time you heard a bass or baritone singer in a group? When the last time you seen an OJs or Boys and Men? They don't want that. It's too masculine. It's too masculine. Do you remember when we grew up with even though there was never any black guys or Latinos really, but It still was the element of Rambo, Arnold Schwarzenegger, so forth and so on. Now you don't even see that no more. So during slavery, men like me, they would use the convey a point. Either they would kill me or they would break me. Maybe some of y'all don't know what occurred during the breaking, because in the school systems today, it's so ridiculous. Do y'all even understand why J.D. Rockefeller wanted the school system in place? He did not want entrepreneurs. He wanted employees. Entrepreneurs lead, employees go. They sheeply. But they would break. So part of the breaking would, they would rape me in front of people to let people know they take the biggest, strongest black man and say, you see what we did to him? And it would send a message out to everybody else. So the strength and the worth, because we were tribal, so the strength and the worth of black men. Do you know we were stronger as a people when we were slaves? Not economically and so forth and so on, but we realized we always had. So we strengthened it. You know why our great-great-grandparents had so many children? They trying to preserve the bloodline, preserve the heritage, preserve the legacy. So they had multiple children and so forth and so on. And the women knew, for the worth of preserving our family line, I'll endure the pain of 9 months of labor and having a water birth and so forth and so on, with no epidurals and so forth and so on. So they looked and said the greater worth supersedes this temporary pain. As well as all you mothers know, the joy that when you see your child born, is somehow of it removes the pain that you're going through. But they broke that. So then they came with offering us a little bit of places in society. You know, you can be a superstar. At the expense of your family. And we were so poor at the time that as long as the man could go get the bag, he didn't have to be present, because we ain't had nothing. Like, I don't know where you find in the scripture that the man go out and do it and the wife stay home. I don't know where y'all get it from. I don't have no idea where you get that from. If you read, so for all of y'all that read the Apocrypha or the Pseudepigrapha, if you read the story of Adam and Eve, they were both given roles in the earth. It wasn't, so, and we have roles, but it wasn't to the point that, look, in the early 1900s on up to the late 2000s, men didn't really know their children across the board. You ask the average dad, what's your daughter's favorite color? You don't know. What is your son like? You don't really know. Well, as long as I make money and pay all the bills, that's all that matters. So when your daughter get older, she started expecting the man to be the same way. So she don't have nobody to confide in. You're supposed to be king in your house. Your queen's supposed to be able to come talk to you. One, because you need to hear her, because sometimes she have a perspective that you can't see, but that was stripped to the point that notoriety, what today they call tokenism, became the thing to be. So the same thing happened in my life. So when I ended up homeless, I remember some guys pulled up in downtown Baltimore, said they were looking for some people to work. I said, okay, I'll go. Got in the car, said, hold on, let me stop at this phone booth and call my grandmother. I didn't know who these guys were. I called my grandmother. Told her, say, hey, I'm ready to go to work. She's like, where? I said, I don't know. I said, hold on, let me get the guy. So I called a guy out of his car. I said, hey, my grandma will talk to you. So she talked, but I don't know what she said to him. And next thing I know, we ended up in a place called Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Now keep in mind, I grew up all my life in Baltimore City. We get to Elizabeth City, North Carolina. I woke up in the car, got out, it's nighttime, but all I see is field. I'm like, what the hell is this? But I go in, lay down. Of course, I needed to lay down. I'd been getting high and running the streets and sleeping wherever I could and so forth and so on. So going to sleep was easy. And then I woke up and it was daylight and I looked and I was like, what is this? Oh boy. But it was like, well, I ain't homeless no more. Time going on, I'm working, it's an aggravated migrant farm. So I'm working for this guy. He see my work ethic. He come get me, say, I'm gonna adopt you. He wasn't on no homo stuff, so forth and so on. He wasn't really trying to give me identity neither, but he thought I could be good for the business, so he made me security. Keep in mind, all that ratchet stuff that I was doing in Baltimore City was not gone. I just entered to another environment, and the opportunity to manifest that ratchetness and that rage didn't present itself. But when he gave me the role as security, oh, the trigger. I can hurt people and get away with it. And then guess what I came in contact with? See, there wasn't no heroin in the city, in Camden, North Carolina. But they were smoking crack. And this man who ran the migrant farm, who should have been, because he was a Freemason, so he should have been trying to restore men. Instead, he saw, if I keep these men addicted, they'll stay here, won't have nowhere to go, and they'll work for me forever. So he looked at me and said, oh, I could use Mike because he's strong, He not on drugs at the time. And then crack came. I said, oh. Why do we not assume our roles in life? Why do we see a situation with a young man or whatever? And as men, I'm talking to men. Because I'll admit, women do some work, yes. Matter of fact, they do more work than they should do because we believe lies through our society and we have abandoned ship. Churches, organizations, we have abandoned ship in regards to men. Because I work for an organization. I know men that have organizations. And like I was in a meeting last night, and all these narratives about we got to reach the children first, that's a bunch of bull crap. The children come from a family. Listen, if you get the man to think healthy, get the woman to think healthy, then guess what happens with the children? They don't need to come to you. Your organization should not be long-standing. It should be put into place so families could be strengthened and restored, and you cease to exist. But you don't want to do that because you lose money. So that's why you don't focus on the dads. That's why you don't correct the dads and correct the mamas and tell them what a real household is supposed to look like. So around '99, I started dating this woman when I was in Elizabeth City. We packed up, we moved to Atlanta. I started smoking cocaine. Just because you ain't getting high no more doesn't mean you're not selling at it. She ended up pregnant. See, I know me. I got to Atlanta, started working. We had an efficiency, so I'm working. I'm trying to be something respectable, if that's the word you want to use. And I was leaving. Actually, we were staying at a co-ed shelter at first till we found some place affordable to live based on the income. And I was the only one working. And I was leaving out, and she grabbed me, and I pushed her back on the bed. A few days later, I kind of realized she had a miscarriage. So I pushed her back on the bed because I knew me. I got to the point, I was 28 years old at the time. I knew me. I said, I got to get out of this room because this tension is high, and I know what I'll do. When the tension thankfully, thank God, somehow enough, he allowed me to come to understand, to start realizing stuff about myself. So again, I knew I got to leave out of this room because I know the next thing to happen. So I intentionally just shoved, not push, but gently pushed her on the bed so I could get away. As my girlfriend at the time, she thought I might have been going out to flirt with one of the other women. I wasn't, I just needed some space. She had a miscarriage. Time went on. We ended up coming back to North Carolina. Get back to North Carolina. Guess what's in North Carolina? In Elizabeth City, North Carolina now. Heroin. I had been free from drugs for 9 months. And now heroin is there. I said, well, I could do heroin. It ain't. It's just gonna make me chill. Let me see. My lady I was with at the time, we out in the club. I leave out of the club, go stab a joke in the neck. Thankfully, I didn't get him because he pulled away. Another time out of the club, walking with this dude, I smash his head up against a tree. Another time out of the club, fighting. I got burnt, not from drug use, I was on a job and some fuel blew up. So I got burnt. I'm in the club, my hand is in a splint, I had a skin graft. It was like paper on water. I'm in the club like that trying to fight, to the extent that throughout my life, my late teen years and my adult life before I went to prison, people started realizing, they see me in the club, see me outside drinking, they said, no, you're taking you to the house, because I like violence. You know what I mean? I was the guy that having a bunch of women didn't really intrigue me. It was the fear of hurting people and so forth and so on, because I had been hurt. So I wasn't really no gangster. It looked like it, but I was hurting, and nobody would tell me how to deal with my hurt as a man. As a biological man, because they done blurred the lines. Now you say man now, and you don't know what you're talking about. As a biological, traditional, by design man. And let me add this, everything has a design, and when you deviate from that design, you run the risk of creating what's called abnormal. So in all my violence and so forth and so on, I became abnormal. Ironically though, everybody celebrated the abnormalists because what it did, it aided to the agenda of the nation to destroy communities, to destroy families, and then I get other young men to become like me, so it continues and continues and continues, and we put it in music. And while some of y'all watch this video and it, intrigued, and it's a powerful story, you come to my church, you come to my organization, there's still a group of people that if I would take what I'm saying in this video and put it into the song, it would go platinum. So who I'm really speaking to for the most part is those people who would hear this, and if it was in a song, they would love it and bounce to it, who y'all not trying to reach. So you don't get so intrigued with my story that you miss, are you one of the ones too that's seeing and not trying to reach? And I know everybody not called to do the same thing. Everybody can't go into the hood and talk to the gang members. I get it. But some of you are you doing that? Do you see a young man that was like I was in any degree and just walk by him and don't say nothing? I remember a pastor friend of mine told me something. He said he was preaching at a church, and he said, it's a shame that you got people living right next door to you going to hell and you don't even give a damn. And he told me, he told the people that the worst thing is, the only thing you've heard me say is, you don't give a damn. Right next to you, you pass him every day. You don't even stop to even offer any kind of instruction, any kind of wisdom. So, stay in Atlanta for 9 months. We come back in 2000. I started sniffing heroin again. The lady I was with at the time, I remember like yesterday, she said, you worse now than you was before. I was like, look, yeah. I remember we were in a party. I was having a party, 2000, November 6, 2002. Some friends of mine from East St. Louis were throwing a party for me. And I remember Patricia, the lady I was with at the time, who I went to Atlanta with, she asked, she said, you know you just turned 30? I said, what does that mean? Nobody had ever told me what that meant for a man. Or he might have, what that mean, 30? I got this party going on, we in it turned up, so forth and so on. This was November 6, 2002. December 6, 2002, the detective was at my door. December 5th, 2002, I went to a church. And in the church, they had a guest speaker who was a man, raw, today my kind of speaker. He came and talked to me after the service, and then the niece and some other sisters of the church came and got around me, and the niece of the pastor told me, said, you're going to prison. Well, the next morning the detective was at my door for attempted murder and armed robbery. I cut this dude from midair. I get arrested. I go straight to sleep. I've been 3 weeks before I got arrested, I started shooting. Thank the Lord I went to prison because ain't no telling what would have happened with using drugs intravenously. But I remember December 30th, 2002. Keep in mind, from December 6th, 2002 to December 30th, 2002, something spiritual was going on. I didn't realize it. December 30th, 2002, I was in my cell by myself and I heard the Holy Spirit ask me, said, what you gonna do? This your last chance. I got on for it, threw my hands up. Keep in mind, I ain't from this city. I ain't from Elizabeth City, so forth and so on. Guys are coming in who used to see me in the streets, you know what I mean, when I was getting high, Keep in mind, they see me, I'm 195 pounds when I was in the street. By the time they come in, I'm 240. Killing dips in the corner of the stairwell, doing push-ups and so forth and so on. Then word got to me. I actually started a Bible study in the block. It's funny because all I knew was the story of Job. That's just all I knew. But I knew men needed to hear something else than the same destructive stuff that I had been hearing and now they're hearing. And I remember a young man called me and said, you know they got a hit out on you. I was like, what? He said, yeah, they got a hit out on you. So ironically, I was trying to get out on bond. Let me tell you how great God is. I had this is crazy now, assault with deadly weapon, intent to kill, inflicting serious injury, and armed robbery. They gave me $2,500 bond. All the people I knew that could have got me out, I called them, they claimed they were broke. I was like, what? I know y'all got the bag. I just left 30 days ago. Nobody would come get me. See, now in hindsight, I said, if I'd have got out on bond and seen some of the people that would have had a hit on me, either they would have killed me or I'd have been arrested again facing life. Because, I mean, yeah, I come to Christ, but I wasn't mature enough to handle any kind of conflict yet. I hadn't been discipled. Nobody had talked to me again. So, 3 or 4 months go by, I'm asking God, I said, man, I want to ask the guy I tried to kill her, I want to apologize to him. Time go on, and this guy's nephew shows up in my block. I don't recognize him, he don't recognize me. We were on the top tier talking one day and started talking. They were like, yeah, I heard the guy that tried to kill my uncle was in here. I was like, yeah, I know that guy that tried to kill your uncle, but he's changed. So I went and got my charge papers. You know, they take your mugshot when you first get arrested. And I showed them, he was like, yeah, I do remember seeing you around there. He said, but he looked at the mugshot and looked at me standing in front of me. He said, these 2 different people. Like, it's just 2 totally different people. Time go by, listen, nobody ever tells him who I am. I did 9 months in the county, was in that same block with him for 3 to 4 months. A month before he gets out, I'm sitting in my cell, washing my clothes out in the bucket, and I hear, go tell him who you are. I believe it's God. Simultaneously, I hear a voice, if you go tell him, you know what's going to happen, you went in with another child, but there was the devil. Again, go tell him who you are. Simultaneously, don't do it. 3rd time, it was stern, go tell him who you are. So I get up, grab my charge papers, go in his cell, give him my charge papers. He looks at him. He like, oh, you was with the guy. I was like, no, I wasn't with him. It was me. Nobody else was there. He looked at the charge papers, dropped his head, and said, if God can forgive you, so can I. I ended up moving out of my cell, into his cell. We playing dollars on the floor, become best friends. He gives me his mother's phone number before he leave. Call his mom sometimes. She said, oh my God, yes, my son told me about you. I'm so glad, Time go on. Of course, I get sentenced to 14 to 19 years. Best thing ever happened in my life. Through that time, I started noticing, started looking at men, and started seeing myself like, yeah, he might be this, but he don't have to stay like that. Yeah, he might even be a deadbeat dad, as they call it, but he don't have to stay like that. Yeah, he might be throwed off, he might be 730, he might be ratchet, he might be crazy, but he don't have to stay like that. I can't determine who's going to change or who ain't. But if you don't lay education, spiritual principles out to a person, then how you expect them to change if you don't give them a plan? You can't just tell people they're wrong and expect that to some kind of spark some degree of change in them. You gotta walk with them. So I started doing that while I was in prison. To the point that I remember chaplains would call down, which is actually against policy, would call down because other ministers weren't coming in to preach, couldn't make it, and they say, hey, called me to the chaplain's office, would you mind speaking for service today? Such thing coming, so forth, so on. To the point that I remember being at Lanesboro maximum security prison in 2012, 13 to 14. At the time, worst, most violent maximum security prison in North Carolina. But even then, getting called by chaplains and so forth and so on to come talk to gang members and and not really telling them what to do, but saying, hey man, what about this? What about this? Hey, how about, look, stay with what you with, but change the narrative. What if you became a positive influence for what you were involved with, and y'all started becoming a healthy force for the community instead of a destructive force for the community? And started teaching principles in there from a biblical perspective of what a man is. You a king, you sort of rule and reign in gentleness and so forth for someone to lead. You sort of be a protector of your home, and you're the first man that your daughter fall in love with, or you're the first superhero for your son, and what you are is what your daughter or your son gonna look for and gonna replicate and so forth and so on, and started seeing guys. And I've been out now and seeing guys tell me, say, man, you don't realize how much of an influence you were to me while I was in prison. I'm talking about guys that I wouldn't even talk to because I was like, it just don't look like they listening. But I see him now and hear that story to me. So now I'm out now, 51 years old with two daughters, a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. Yeah. And been out now almost 7 years, and bless the Lord, came in contact with the director of an organization here in Asheville, North Carolina called My Daddy Taught Me That. It's a youth organization, but the director and I became friends. We began to talk and so forth and so on. So I pitched my initiative and my narrative to him, and he's like, come on. So now in partnership with him, going into 7 schools, working with youth from tutoring to social skills education, gang affiliated, 2 fatherhood groups, so forth and so on. This video is even in our building. And my mission is just like, I get that this man, particularly father, this man that you've come together with and had children, may not be, but don't immediately write him off. Because there are historical things that were set in place that caused him to go this route. And we all know, man, we all know that it takes time to reframe or renew a mind. It just don't happen instantaneously. How do we offer so much grace and so much patience to other people for their situations of life, but when it comes to a man, we want him to perform a miracle or sprinkle some pixie dust on his head? You gotta walk with people. See, I got into prison and started meeting men that had been there for 20, 30 years. They started walking with me because they didn't want me to get out and end up becoming part of the system or fueling what they call recidivism. You know why the recidivism rate is so high for men, black and brown men in America? Because ain't nobody trying to help them for the most part. Not that aren't any organizations at all, but when they get out, what do they have to go back to? What training is set in place? So forth and so on. So like even with the work we do in the county jails in the city with them, partner with coming under My Daddy Taught Me That, I created a curriculum for men getting out of prison, how to reintegrate back into society, and then step by step. And it's not just come watch this PowerPoint, it's no, I'm gonna walk with you as you begin to implement these steps into your life until you decide you don't want to walk no more. Hey, I know they said you're a deadbeat dad. Hey, I got a curriculum. I'll walk with you until you decide you don't want to walk no more. But if you continue to decide you want to walk, I'll walk with you until you learn how to implement these principles into your life and so forth and so on. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm hearing people like, oh man, you a hands-on dad. No, I'm not a hands-on dad. I'm a dad. I'm a dad. And my wife shouldn't have to do it all. The same way I expect stuff from her, she expects stuff from me. So it's a balance. And I attack the system. Stop saying it's about our people, black and brown in our communities, without and you ain't doing nothing to improve it. I know some of our men are off the chain, but where do they go to get back linked into the chain? Where do they go to realize, hold on, my first responsibility and my strongest influence starts in my family? Where do they go? Where do they go? Again, you can't keep pointing the finger at people without creating a solution. Will everybody, it's just like fishing. You can't catch everything in the pond, lake, river, or creek, but you can catch some. So you create and say, hey, and whomsoever will. Because I was one of them. Listen, you could not walk. Listen, I remember in my younger years and going to Baltimore City, I would walk down the street and people would cross the street. I was so ratchet. For some, yes, cross the street, because everybody ain't called to do the same thing. But who is going to stop and say, hey, look, watch this. Sometimes that's all it takes. Hey, bro, there's another way. Hey, if you ever decide you need somebody to talk to, I'm here. That's all. I ain't saying try to initial step, try to set up some hour-long conversation. Hey, so-and-so, whatever, I'm here. I'm here. Hey, it ain't just your fault. Something I tell to the youth. Listen, I apologize, because it's not just your fault. The generation, the men in my generation, we planted seeds, and now y'all the harvest. It's not just your fault. We dropped the ball. So I'm here to apologize and say, hey, there's another way you can go. I'll walk with you. Hey, man, I understand that you were watching the videos and and that caused a fantasy to be created in your mind. So when you met this young lady, you had that fantasy in your mind that blocked you from seeing the reality, and now y'all got a child. Well, bro, that's your fault. You still got a child to raise. But I'm here for you. I'm here for you. I would like for y'all to be married, but I'm here for you to learn to cultivate a friendship with the mother and then help you to become the best father you can be for your child. You gotta have a solution for them. You can't keep saying you wrong, you a deadbeat, da 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 da. Don't even do that. Before you point out somebody's wrong, point out to them the solution. And then if they become resistant, you. Okay, everybody, hold on for a second. I'm getting a little chilly. Remember, I used to joke old people like, "How you so cold?" Now I'm over 50. I should have kept my mouth closed. Now we're young. Because I get it. So give me a second, viewers. Make sure my audio guy, can you hear me? Excellent. So now, first I want to give thanks to my brother, my friend, my director, Mr. Keenan Lake, who founded what's known in this city as My Daddy Taught Me That youth organization, which he started 12 years ago. I met Mr. Lake five and a half years ago, last year, no, 2 school seasons ago actually, so it's 2022, we got together and started talking, and he asked me if I would come along and assist him in going to the schools, which is really taking off, helping some youth. And turning through many conversations that he and I had, he told us he knew I had a fatherhood initiative, workforce development, so forth, so on. So I brought my whole initiative under My Daddy Taught Me That. Then My Daddy Taught Me That, this fatherhood initiative I call Generation to Generation. One generation to one generation, and it's a ripple effect. We're here in Asheville, North Carolina. We're talking about going into communities, doing fatherhood groups. This year, launching groups, a bunch of groups. One, fathers in education, fathers in the community, fathers in health care and health insurance, and compelling and trying to encourage fathers, hey, get regular checkups, so forth and so on, get some health insurance, doing daddy-daughter dances, father-son 3-on basketball tournaments, so forth and so on, and just raising the standard, man, and compelling men. The groups I do in the county jail every Tuesday, you know, and just telling, hey, the responsibility is on you, King. Like I go around, I call everybody King. Whether I'm prophesying to them to become that or speaking to them based on what they're already manifesting. Hey, King, come on, you were created. So let me get this from my biblical perspective. God is Father. So he replicates or he reproduces what he is and the way his kingdom operates. So he created you, man, to be his main image bearer, and in turn your wife and your children manifest the image of his kingdom. So you have to lead. You don't have to keep listening to the destructive rap music. Don't you hear the trumpet being blown, the D1s and so forth, and Meek Mills and so forth and so on, saying, wait a minute, it's time out. This stuff is destroying our community. So what we do in our organization, as much as we can, and as much as people that we talk to, youth or adult, are willing to listen and take the steps, we walk with them. Because I'm going to take a quote from Dr. Tony Evans, who wrote a book called Kingdom Man. If you have a destructive man, then you have a destructive house. If you have a destructive man in a destructive house, then you have a destructive family. If you have a destructive man in a destructive house, in a destructive family, then you have a destructive city. If you have a destructive man in a destructive house, in a destructive family, in a destructive city, then you have a destructive state. And it's a ripple effect. It becomes a destructive nation, which leads to a destructive world, or dysfunctional. But if we dial it back and get to the root of things and get to the original image and say, hey, dysfunctional, destructive, whatever you want to call man, hey, you don't have to stay that way. You can come to generation and get some learning skills, some education, some transformation, and become what they are calling you now as dysfunctional or destructive, and become functional and productive. You can change from becoming a copy to an image bearer. And you begin to see your family transform, and then you begin to see your cities transform. And we begin to win this battle we've been losing for over 400 or 500 years. So, I mean, we'll go there, been losing since Adam dropped the ball in the garden. But we can restore, we can repair, we can replenish, and in turn, then we'll reproduce a good fruit in our homes and in our communities. Again, I'm Michael Hall, Program Director, Generation to Generation Fatherhood Initiative. Let's get together, let's do this work. And let's restore, repair, replenish, and reproduce. Love y'all.